Hi, today I'm going to be talking to you about default values and keyword assignment. So what you see on the right here is a fairly silly complex function that I've concocted just for this particular exercise. So call it complex function because it has so many of these variables that it needs in order to function. It has something, another thing, number of silly walks, and so on. It's a whole lot of functions, and believe me, if you do a whole lot more programming, either in this class or when you go out in the world of wonderful programming stuff, you'll probably have to come up with your own versions of complex functions that take in a whole lot of variables as well. So the problem with complex functions is that when you call it, you have to specify a whole lot of things, and sometimes it can get confusing. Let's say that I want something to be a cat, and another thing to be a dragon, and number of silly walks to be 100, and the cans of spam to be 20, and that things should be random, so the random indicator is true, and I love furry things, so furry should be true, and frogs found, let's say we found just one frog, and unfortunately the doomsday device is not complete, so that's false. So you call that, it responds with the output of the function if you give it all those variables, and that looks all nice and good. But the problem is, what happens when you want to change something? You have to type it the whole thing in over again, complex function, and let's say T and a dog, 10 silly walks, let's say 20 cans of spam, let's say that everything else is the same. So that was a whole lot of work, a lot of painful stuff to try to change those three first things. And, that's kind of painful, but what can you do? Well, I guess we could try to simplify things a little. If all we're going to change is just these first three things, we could make a new function, like the one below over here, where the user is only required to specify the first three things, and everything else is pre-specified for the user. Wonderful, you've made life simpler by making a simple looking function. Let's try it out. Simple function. This time I'm just going to say T and a dog and 10, and things look better. You don't have to type so many things. You just have to type three things instead of, I don't know how many things that was, but there's a whole lot of things. So that was nice, but it comes up with a problem. What if you needed to change one of these things? Like, let's say you wanted to change the cans of spam instead of always being 30. You needed just this one particular time, you needed cans of spam to be 2. Then I guess you could just change it in the function definition, save it, reload it in Python, and this time I'm just going to copy and paste it. And then you'll find that indeed the cans of spam is 2 now. Well, that's a whole lot of work for your users of your function, and fairly bad programming practice to have to change the definition of your function every time you needed to change a variable. You ought to make it a variable again. But then if you keep on doing that by adding it to its list of variables, cans of spam, you're back to square one. You have to, if each of these things you only occasionally need to change, and you have to add it to the function definition every time, you'll end up with your complex function all over again. So that's not good. Can we come up with something better? Well, luckily, Python thought about this problem and came up with the idea of default values. So over here, um, notice that we have this function again, and it's the exact same as before, except now uh, we've set we see this equal sign and some numbers after a few of these variable names. For example, can of spam equals 10, randomness indicator equals true, and so on. So what this does, if the user doesn't specify a value for can of spam, it sets the value of can of spam equal to 10 and runs the function as usual. Same thing with all these other variables. So now I can call this function complex with defaults. Complex with defaults with a cat, a werewolf, and 1,000 silly walks, and it'll run just fine. So it had set can of spam equals 10 and all the other variables to its default values. Wonderful. And this time, if I needed to change the can of spam to 20, all I had to do is just add number 20 for cans of spam, and everything else is just the default values, so I don't have to change anything else. And now we have 20 cans of spam. Great, that saves us a whole lot of time. But it's still not quite there. Well, what if we needed to change the number of frogs found? it's kind of really far out in our list of variables. So if we did that, we kind of had to type it all out again. So 20 was a cancel spam. You have to say true for randomness indicator. And unfortunately, it's a non-furry thing. And let's say, I forget how many frogs I said I wanted. Let's just say 10. And we didn't have to specify that is Doomsday device complete. So we can write all of this out, hit enter, and now we do have 10 scary frogs. Oh, yeah, I didn't mean to do that, but 10 scary frogs are very scary and they deserve their own line and syntax error. Anyway, so that was, I guess, slightly better since you didn't have to type is Doomsday device complete, but it was still kind of problematic. You had to type all those other things that you didn't really need to because those were the default values. Luckily, Python comes up with another cool solution for this problem. So now, complex with defaults, I can just say something is cat, and I do have to say a value for cat and another thing, and for number of silly walks, since those do not have any default values. So let's say another thing is werewolf again, and that number of silly walks is 40. And this time, if I just want to change the value of frogs found from the default value, I can just specify it by using a keyword assignment like this. Frogs found, let's say frogs found is 80. So when I do that, it sets the frogs found variable to 80 and everything else to its default values. That is really cool and powerful. Now, it does come up with some, you have to use a little bit of caution when you're using keyword assignments. You can't, for example, do something like this. You have to put the keyword assignments after the list of variables, because if you do keyword assignment before then, you'll come up with a syntax error. And also, you can even specify the things that do not have default values with a keyword assignment, like this. So complex with defaults, you can say something equals cat. And let's say that I don't want to specify another thing yet. Let's just say I want to specify the number of silly walks this time. The number of silly walks. Let's say that's 100. And let's say that another thing is, oh, let's say a vampire. So it just sets something to cat, even though another thing is the second variable in the function definition. I can specify another thing as the third thing as long as I use keyword assignments. Same thing with number of silly walks. Even though in the function is the third number or the third variable, I can make it a second thing by using these keyword assignments. This kind of notation makes it easier for you to keep track of what values you're passing into your function. Sometimes when you're working on a long project, you can easily forget what the order of variables are. So writing it this way will help it make it more obvious when you're reading back and seeing, what was this 5 over here? What did it correspond to? Using keyword assignment lets you make the code a whole lot more readable. So that's it for today. Um, I hope you found this feature of Python as useful as I do. Have a good day, and don't let the frogs be too scary at you.